Hello, my friends. Number 11 of the Mighty Oak Stories fair is here. And we left off where, said Yellowbeak and flew off. Timmy said, "What do we do now, Mighty Oak?" "Well, I think you two should make your way home to your drays. We don't want to worry your families, do we?" "Don't forget your nuts, boys." They looked at each other, then smiled. "We forgot our nuts," said Snubs. "I know," said Timmy, laughing, as they walked to the shed. Mighty Oak kept his eye on the fair. He heard nothing at all. He did not know if this was good or bad. "Hello, Mighty Oak," said a Pekingese being walked in the park. "Hello, Shan. Heard anything yet?" "No, I was just thinking that myself." "Oh, well, they say no news is good news, don't they? Goodbye, Mighty Oak. Goodbye, Shan." The rest of the day went by without anything happening, except that is for a lot of animals asking the mighty tree what was going on, and sadly he had nothing to tell them. It was now Wednesday morning, and Mighty Oak remembered he had asked a lot of animals to come this afternoon, as he was sure he would know something. He was getting a little bit worried now. "Good morning, Mighty Oak." "Good morning, Timmy. How are you?" "Fine, but I couldn't sleep, Mighty Oak." "I know what you mean, Timmy." Timmy jumped onto the fence and looked around the park. "Mighty Oak?" "Yes." "There's that man from the bumper cars. God, doesn't he look different with his pinstripe suit on?" "He's talking to a man with a funny hat." "That's a bowler hat, Timmy. We need someone over there right now." "I'll go," said a coal tit. "I'll go with you," said a robin. They both flew to the men straight away. Good boys, said the mighty tree. They reached the man. In fact, the coal tit landed on the man's bowler hat until the other man brushed him off. The two birds stayed a safe distance, but close enough that they could hear what the men were saying, what the men were talking about. "Right, Timmy, my boy, let's see what happens." Timmy and Mighty Oak watched everything that happened. The owner of the fair was showing the official-looking man around the fair. He was pointing up at the ride, showing him everything. "Oh, they're leaving," said Timmy. "No, look, Timmy, the man with the hat is staying behind." "Oh, yes, he's writing things down, isn't he?" "Yes, Timmy." The man from the fair was walking out of the fair. The robin followed him. "Clever boy," said Mighty Oak. The official-looking man was strolling slowly around the fair with the coal tit following. The man from the fair was walking up to Mr. Perkins' shed and knocked on the door. Mr. Perkins came out. The two men spoke for a little while. It looked like Mr. Perkins was smiling. It was difficult to tell at this distance. Then they shook hands and both walked to the fair with the robin following. Mighty Oak and Timmy watched as the three men were now talking. They all bent down. It looked as if Mr. Perkins was showing them something on the ground. Then Mr. Perkins was shaking his head. They were talking for what seemed like ages. "I'm bored," said Timmy. "I want to know what's happening." "I know, Timmy. I must admit it is annoying we can't hear, but that's what the birds are doing. I'm afraid, my boy, we will just both have to be patient." "They're moving," said Timmy. The three men came out of the fairground and walked over to the pavilion on the edge of the cricket pitch. They all went into the pavilion. "What's the coal tit doing, Mighty Oak?" "I'm not sure. He's flown up the window, Timmy. I'm really not sure." "Ah, look, they're coming back." The coal tit and robin landed on the fence next to the mighty tree. "Don't worry. Obviously, we cannot go into the pavilion. So I told a house spider we needed to know what they were talking about. So I put him by the open upper window so he could crawl in." "Well done, boys. What quick thinking. So, boys, what did you hear?" "Well, Flasher thinks that the man with the hat is from the council." "Yes," said the coal tit. "I'm sure I've seen him outside the council office, having lunch on the bench outside the council offices. Anyway, Ziggy heard the man from the fair saying he wants to expand, get bigger, and then he showed the official man a newspaper article." "Yes," said the robin. "He said they're all the craze, very popular. Something about bringing more money in, wasn't it, Flasher?" "Yes, something like that," replied the coal tit. Then the official man said something like, "You do have a point. Yes, it was successful up north." Then the man from the fair said that every town they went to he was having more and more issues with park keepers, councils, as the damage, all the rubbish, and yet the business side of it was very good, always packed, even if it rained. Takings were up every year, said the robin. Yes, then I stayed with the council man and Ziggy followed the boss man from the fair. Didn't you, Ziggy? Yes, said the robin. The man from the fair said to Mr. Perkins he wanted to buy the old car lock factory site, and the idea was that the fair would be there permanently, but he needed Mr. Perkins on his side to convince the man from the council. I told you all he was. See, I was right, said Flasher smugly, the colt interrupting. Carry on, said the mighty tree. Oh, yes, to convince the man from the council what a good idea it was. The man from the fair said, please tell him about the damage to the park, all the extra work it caused, how disruptive it is. Mr. Perkins seemed really pleased. They shook hands and they went to join the other man. Mr. Perkins showed the men the damage to grounds. He explained the hard work to get the park back to a high standard. And then the man from the fair offered to buy the other two men breakfast in the pavilion. Yes, said the coltit, and just as they were going in, I heard the council man say he would like to see papers. And just before the door closed, I'm sure I heard one of the men say something about Mr. Wilson joining them in half an hour. Mr. Wilson, I'm sure I've heard that name before, said the mighty tree. All eyes on the pavilion, boys. Timmy, Ziggy and Flasher all played I Spy to make the time go quicker. About 20 minutes later, the man from the fair left the pavilion on his own and went to where all the caravans were parked. He entered the largest one. Then a few minutes later, he came out carrying a briefcase and then walked to the double gates, where a smartly dressed man was climbing the stile next to the double gates. The two men shook hands and walked towards the pavilion together. I do know him. Sorry, said the mighty tree. I didn't mean to make you all jump. What did you say, sir? Said Timmy. I knew that name rang a bell. Mr. Wilson is the boss of the car factory where Ron works. He's been here for dinner with his wife on many occasions. The two men now entered the pavilion together. We'll have to wait and see what the house spider has to say. The fair was starting to open. Timmy said, I can't stand this. They've been in there for a long time, 1.5 hours, said the mighty tree. Every time the door opened to the pavilion, they hoped it would be them. Then finally, 20 minutes later, the four men came out.